I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
This is Snake Envy. So we posted a video recently about morph names being changed. Most of the feedback was positive, I'd say about 75%, but we did get a lot of questions and comments that we feel like we want to address and clear some things up. Some of it, just people who have different opinions than us, that's fine. Not everybody agrees that someone has a right to name a morph. Okay. I think when you invest the time and the money it takes to create something, I think you're entitled to name it.
The work you put in.
Yeah, it is. It's labor intensive. It's time intensive. The Envy Snow, which San Diego Gopher, which is the thing we were primarily talking about in that first video, that was a 7-year breeding project. So, people are entitled to their opinions, but there are some things that are truly unique. And I guess if you want to argue that you find something in the wild, or maybe, but you still have to prove those out. You still have to make sure you can reproduce them.
Oh, yeah. People find, it's an anery, we'll have you test spread it.
Right.
No, well, you might not be, replicable.
It could just be an anomaly. Okay, so let's get to it. Now, the situation with Glenn Brooks, he's the one that started calling a variation of the Envy Snow zombie. We're not going to dive too deep into that again, other than just to say that we think, because you and he have already spoken and you guys are going to continue to talk that out, but our position is basically there's already terms that exist to describe natural variations within morphs. T positive, T negative, double albino, light phase, dark phase. You could even use a color, I guess, if you wanted to. But those descriptors are already there. You don't need to add a name to a name.
Well, yeah. That's one of my pet peeves is like same genetics, different names, like.
Yeah. But even if you use a name, so he chose zombie to describe a color variation, if you use a name to do that on top of another name, it's just human nature. People are either going to shorten it, maybe they like one name better than the other. So we don't believe Glenn intended any harm to Envy, not at all. We both have a lot of respect for Glenn.
Glenn's a friend, like he's been here before.
Yeah, we wouldn't even know each other if it wasn't for Glenn. He referred me to you, and I respected that at the time, because instead of sell a snake to me, he said, hey, if you want to see some of these pits, go see Jason. He lives near you.
Glenn's a great guy.
Yeah. But regardless of his intent, what has happened is the Envy Snow name has sort of dissipated for a lot of people, and they only know these snakes as zombies. We've encountered many people who don't even know that Envy Snow is the morph. They only associate it with the name zombie. In fact, somebody on Facebook thought they were making a brilliant point as part of this conversation, and they said, hey, it's just good marketing. I didn't even know there was such a thing as an Envy Snow. Well, yeah, that's the point we're making, is for what, it's a good name. And so that name has trumped Envy Snow, and that hurts you regardless of what intent was there. Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely unintentional. But yes, I'm not going to lie, it's pissed me off. Like, like I've been mad for years. I generally don't put that much energy into it, and, but.
Yeah, it's hurt your business, and it's hurt the association between that line and your business. There's no doubt about that. But we are acknowledging that we don't think it was intentional.
No.
But a name on top of a name, that's what happens. It's no different than changing the name.
Yeah. And Glenn and I, we're going to talk. We've been talking a little bit. We'll work this out. It's going to work for both of us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good thing. It's not going to be a lot of anger and hate, and like I am a very reasonable person.
No, we're looking forward to seeing Glenn at Pomona at the Super Show.
Yeah.
But it is a broader discussion that needs to take place, and that's once names are established, there's a good reason to leave them alone and let them stand. All right, so let's address some of the questions, some of the concerns that people brought up. Some of them, I got to be honest, I can't even wrap my head around. They seem completely illogical. I think some other people are just a little misinformed about some of these genetic lines and the fact that several of them that have different names, kind of what we're talking about, they're all the same thing. So let's start with this. Some people say it's selfish to name a morph. Morphs are naturally occurring, regardless of whether anyone's discovered them yet or not. Explain the difference between just an accidental morph and a morph that you intentionally set out to say, hey, what if I combine this with this? Will it work? What do I get? First off, there's a difference between the two.
Yeah. I mean, a single gene morph is usually called what it is, albino this, or
Right.
anery this, or but when you're making a combination, that's when it gets there's a lot more work and detail put into that. I've done a lot of work in Pitchophis. I probably created, I don't know how many, but I bet at least over 20 new morphs in this hobby. I've named one after myself. I'm not greedy. I'm not selfish.
Yeah.
I named one I was proud of.
Right.
I hung my hat on that one, and then we had this issue.
You could have had others.
It's fine.
Now, here's the other thing. We were talking earlier. Even if it is a naturally occurring morph, you see something in the wild, or something just pops in one of your clutches, and you're like, wow, I've never seen that before. It still takes a lot of work to prove whether that truly is something unique, or is it just something that's a variation of what already exists. There's still a lot of work involved in that. If you were to spend years proving all that out, I don't think there's a problem with naming it if you proved it out and said, hey, this is actually something brand new. But either way, it's a lot of work to prove it. We've collected animals from the wild recently, our Gopher Gulch gopher snakes, Great Basins. We don't even know if we suspect, based on the number of aberrant animals we've seen, that it's a genetic trait. We don't know that. That's what we're about to do, is to try and prove it.
Yeah, and just an example, out in Twill County, a friend of mine caught this Great Basin gopher, and it was spotted. It looked like it had leopard print on it. Just the square blotching, almost like...
no saddles, no chain.
Yeah, I bred that thing. I had to do the work. Yeah. I did all this breeding. I did this. It never was compatible. It was never an inheritable trait, is what I'm saying.
Couldn't reproduce.
It wouldn't reproduce. I bred siblings back. I bred siblings back to the parents. Like, it didn't work out, So you have to do the work. You should do a lot of work. If you're going to comment what you're talking about, know what you're talking about.
Have you put in the work? Okay, so another comment that came up frequently was, you've named it an envy snow, but one of the components... Now, I'm going to use the word recipe. This might not be a term that people like Jason or other breeders might typically use, but think of this analogy. Bread, everybody knows what bread is. Eggs, everybody knows what eggs is. Milk, everybody knows what milk is. They exist on their own, but it was the first person to put them together and add a few other things and called it French toast. Well, from that point forward, everybody recognizes that combination. Just because this thing and this thing exist on their own, somebody still has to have the idea to try to combine them. So some people out there have said, because the dire line of albinos is part of the envy snow recipe, that you're a hypocrite because you renamed it envy snow rather than just saying maybe it's a dire snow. So again, it's not that simple. You were combining multiple elements.
Yeah, right.
It's a unique recipe.
The part that is hypocritical is naming the dyer different names, and that's happened.
Yeah, we're going to get to that as well. So is the recipe analogy is a good one. You had the idea, what if I combine this with this? Will it be compatible? What will it produce?
What will it look like?
And what will it look like? And then once you had it, you were still 7 years away from something you thought you'd be proud of offering, right?
Yeah, I mean, the very first Envy Snow was not anything mind-blowing. It wasn't. It was very drab. It was very blah.
Yeah.
And I added in darker components to...
Now, for those who don't know, what is a regular snow San Diego gopher? What is the recipe for that? Or is that just a naturally occurring morph?
No, that's a combo.
Okay.
All snows are combos. You can't... Technically, you can't get one... It'd be pretty... I mean, a snow in the wild has got to be like...
Yeah.
I mean, has it happened? I doubt it, but maybe.
It could.
2 locality morphs,
Yeah.
right next to each other. Things have happened. But and a lot of morphs derive from other morphs. I've seen that a lot. But a regular snow San Diego is a T negative snow, which would be a Bechdel albino or Applegate albino.
Okay.
Combined with anery. Aneuphoristic.
And with Envy, you're using the dire albinos.
Right. A positive.
A T positive.
With more melanin, more colors. That's what makes it neat, is the colors.
You get more color pop versus the Applegate. Okay. So we just want to clear that up in terms of what the difference is between Envy snow and a standard snow. Now, the other comment that we heard a lot was, in addition to kind of watering down the dire name, which just isn't true, because you can breed and reproduce dire albinos all you want, and you call them what they are when you do.
Right.
You added another element. It's a combo morph.
Right.
Okay, so some other people are apparently a little confused. There are some animals that went to Europe. They were head animals. It's understandable. The guys in Europe, they bred them. They had some things pop, and they said, whoa, this is brand new. Well, it was brand new to them. But explain the fact that there are actually 3 different albino morph names to describe the same thing.
Right. We did this last time, but we'll do it again because people didn't listen.
Well, yeah, that one I think got lost in the mix. Plus, look, if you live over in Europe and you're breeding snakes, it's understandable. You might not be fully aware of what's going on over here. No, but they may not be fully aware of everything that's been going on over here. So what are those 3 that are essentially 3 different names and lines to describe the same snake?
So a T-positive Jack Dyer was the founder of the T-positive, this particular strain. He sold, some possible hets probably end up going to Europe through Lloyd Lemke. Well, all of a sudden they pop out this, over in Europe, they pop out this T-positive. And they're like, holy crap. Yeah, it's pretty cool. There is, then striped come out too. Like, you're really stripes gonna pop out too?
Right.
Yeah,
which is very common in the San Diego lines.
But it's not super common in the wild, and it's it's common in the hobby because of hobbyists. Right. But it's not something that just randomly pops up very often.
So the breeder in Europe, and his name was Klumper.
Michael Klumper, I believe, was the first guy, and he called them Klumper albinos or Klumper hypos or whatever. But
technically, those are dyers.
Well, it's the same thing. And then Michael moved on, and Al Stoughton refined this, made these beautiful animals. He did great work. So did Michael Klumper, by the way. He did some amazing work.
They refined it further.
They refined it. Where Jack Dyer was breeding this line for no pattern. What is pattern? Pattern is color. When you breed the pattern out, you're going to get yellow and orange snakes. You're not going to get all these purples.
And you're not going to get much contrast. Really.
Now, for all the people that want to say that, well, there's variations and they're different strains, do some work. And I've done the work. I've bred Dyers to Clumpers. 100% T-positive animals. I bred Dyers to Super Hypos. They all came out a morph. It's allelic. To me, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's an easy trail to follow. It's not rocket science where these animals came
It's easily provable that they're all the same. They just have different names.
Lloyd Limpy, Jack Dyer were friends.
And it's fine. People put work
fine.
in refining and pulling out other colors. That's fine. And our point there would be, if you think you're onto something new, reach out to the founder who named it and say, hey, do we just have a natural variation that you're producing also? One of the things we're going to show you in terms of variability of normal snows and envy snows is that what other breeders are calling zombie, Jason produces those too. And we're going to show you that variation in his line here in this building. You just didn't name variations. And our argument is it's kind of silly to name variations. There's already terms that you could use for color variations, whether it be the albinos or whether it be light phase, dark phase. We even describe some morphs in Pituophis with color, Kingsville red. That would be acceptable as well. It's just when you change names or add names to existing
The name
names.
changing is the most confusing part of it all.
That's the key, and that's where all the confusion
It happens
comes
with
from.
other stuff too.
Yeah.
Not just this.
Okay, the other thing that was brought up quite a few times was hypo versus super hypo. Now, for me, just the hobbyist, not a breeder, when I hear hypo, super hypo, those to me are descriptors of genetic variants. They're not a name given by a breeder. I view those as two different things. Now, I recognize there was probably a breeder who produced the first supers, and he called them supers to differentiate them from hypos, but he didn't put his or her name on it. That's the distinction we're trying to make. But for those out there that are trying to compare super hypo to envy snow and saying, hey, if you're okay with that name, you should quit. Some people have even gone so far as to say you shouldn't ever use the term super hypo, that it's hypocritical to use it and then get upset about envy snow. So for those who don't know, what is the difference between a hypo and a super hypo?
In San Diego's or
In general. But in San Diego.
Okay, so to me, like, where I'll probably get roasted again for this, but like, whatever. Hal Stoughton refined them so much, and they got so much darker and so more condensed, and the purple's almost black. Like,
Yeah.
he done great work. He refined it. He changed it to super hypo, clumper to super hypo, or just gave it another term.
Right.
Which,
And again, as a descriptor, I don't think that's a big deal to say this is a hypo, this is a super hypo, because yes, they both may be missing some of that
And-
melanin, but these are still very dark.
regardless if it's hypo or
Technically, they're all hypo.
T positive, yeah,
Right.
whatever. Like, we're just
Yeah.
gonna I believe they're T positive albinos, so that's what I'm calling them. And
So you think it's a T positive, T negative difference, and that's where you get the darker color.
oh yeah, you can't.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. But there's a natural variance in that single gene. You can see dyers that are incredibly colorful to blah.
Right.
and it's just a natural variation. To me, a super hypo would be this description. A hypo that's not complete dominance. A super would be like a double version of that.
Okay.
That's what I would personally call a super hypo.
Okay.
But
so we're basically talking about variation of the same thing. And T positive, T negative is a good way to differentiate that even further. So yes, super hypo was an invented term that a breeder came up with, but it's not named after himself. It's not unique to his business. That's where I, as a hobbyist, as a consumer, that's where I make the distinction. If people don't want to call it super hypo and just want to still call it hypo or want to call T negative T positive, that's not affecting him directly. It's not affecting his business.
no,
Those are just natural variations and natural, different ways to describe genetic variants. We are talking specifically about named morphs. So to summarize, we do believe that when you put in that work, and there is work involved, even if you discover a morph by accident or from the wild, you still have to prove it, and prove that you can replicate it before you can name it and you can sell it. So that's the first thing. Second thing, if you're working with an existing named morph, we believe if you think you're onto something new, or if you have plans to try to combine it with something new altogether and see if that may lead to an entirely new recipe, just reach out to the founder of that morph and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm thinking of doing. What's your thoughts? Or even just ask the person you got the snakes from, is this a variance you see, or am I onto something new? Is that fair?
I think so.
We should just be respectful of people's work. We should be fair to one another. And we should recognize that when we make changes and do these things, it can hurt the reputation and sales of another breeder. So that's our pitch to the hobby. Let's respect one another's work. Let's respect each other. Let's communicate with each other when we're working with someone's named product. Fair enough?
Yeah.
It's a brave new day. So as always, please like, subscribe, and comment. Tell us if you think we're full of it. We've already heard of some people who think we're full of it. Yeah. There are people out there who don't believe anybody should be able to name morphs. I don't think those folks understand the work involved.
There's a lot of named morphs. Like tons of. Look at the corns. Look at corn snake.
Yeah.
Hognose. Ball pythons. There's all this weird stuff.
Let's just keep the original names and let's respect each other.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.